As we continue to talk about how we can essentially make one shape out of multiple shapes or create interesting pieces of artwork based upon multiple shapes, one of the things that we haven't talked about so far are the actual Pathfinders found within the Pathfinder panel. Of course, if you don't have the Pathfinder panel open, you can open it by coming up to the window menu, and from there you can choose Pathfinder. You'll notice down here towards the bottom there's a series of commands called Pathfinders. So I'm working with this document called pathfinders.ai, which is available inside your exercise files folder. We have a collection of leaves that are essentially stacked on top of one another. This can work as a good example as to how these different Pathfinder commands work. So here we have 3 leaves. We have an orange, blue, and green leaf. What I'd like you to do is select all 3. The best way to do that is to simply click and drag a marquee around all 3. And what we want to do is come over to the Pathfinder panel and click this first button, which is called Divide. What Divide will do is essentially divide any overlapping areas into their own independent shapes. And so as I hover over this blue leaf, we can see that we are in fact essentially hiding a portion of the blue leaf with the green leaf. And you can see that blue line, that outline that intersects with the green leaf. And the same is true with this orange leaf. So if we come over and click this button, which is Divide, you'll notice now we have essentially 6 different shapes. We have this one shape here, we have this one shape here, this one shape here, and of course the main leaves. So that's how the Divide Pathfinder works. The next thing that we want to take a look at is something called Trim, which if we select these 3 leaves, does something similar except it gets rid of the overlapped areas and essentially will create these 3 independent shapes, ignoring all the overlapping content. So again, if we come over here and click this button, which is Trim, you'll notice that that's the case. You also lose the stroke, but now we have these 3 independent leaves. And this can be very helpful if you're working with color separations for screen printing. The next thing that we want to take a look at is Merge, which is this 3rd button. Let's go ahead and select these 3 leaves. With these 3 leaves selected, you can come over and click Merge. And what Merge will do is behave much like Trim, but Merge will group any content that uses the same color into one shape. So in this case, we have 2 blue leaves instead of this orange leaf, and it will become one object. So let's come over here and click that button. Merge, you'll notice you lose the stroke, but again, what we have now are 2 different shapes, the blue shape and the green shape. And really, I'm just going through these different Pathfinders so you know what their behaviors are. I'm not necessarily saying that these are the appropriate situations for these behaviors, but nevertheless, as you're creating artwork, a lot of times you will use simple shapes as the foundation. These Pathfinder tools can really give you the ability to create sophisticated pieces of artwork by using simple shapes. So let's come down here towards the bottom now and select this 4th grouping of leaves. With these 4 selected, we want to come over and click the 4th button, which is Crop. And what Crop will do is take the topmost element and use it as a mask, essentially. So in this case, I guess it doesn't really make much sense to crop that because we only have small portions of the leaves that overlap. So instead, what we want to do is come over and choose one of our drawing tools. I'll go ahead and select the rectangle tool. And in this case, I'm not going to use a fill color, so I'll just come over here and click None. And once you click None, you can then come over and click and drag a rectangle on top of these leaves. Now, because we just drew this rectangle, it's considered above each of these leaves, so it is the topmost shape. And if you wanted to essentially ensure that that was the case, you can press V on the keyboard to activate the selection tool. With this rectangle selected, you can come up to the Object menu. From there, you can choose Arrange, and then you can choose Bring to Front. But nevertheless, this will act now as a mask, essentially. It will reveal the content within the shape and hide the content outside of it. It almost behaves like a cookie cutter. So we're going to see the content of the leaves within this rectangle. Everything outside the rectangle will be cropped off. So let's go ahead and select all 4 of those shapes, come over and click Crop, and you'll notice that that's the case. So next we have Outline. And if we come over and select all of these leaves, these 3, what Outline will do is divide the shapes much like the Divide Pathfinder, except it's going to use strokes as the way to create the division. So if we come over and click outline, you'll notice that that is the case. It's kind of hard to see here, but as you mouse over these paths, you can see they're all independent paths. And right now we don't have a stroke assigned to it necessarily. So what we want to do is select the stroke swatch, and all we have to do here really is increase the weight of the stroke. So if I choose 3 points, you'll notice that the stroke now takes on the fill color attributes. But again, we have really 6 independent shapes here. The last thing that we have over here is something called minus back, which is the opposite of the shape mode that we used called minus front. If you remember, when we demonstrated minus front, what we did is we took 2 circles. So again, let's come over and choose the ellipse tool. With the ellipse tool, I want you to use a black stroke. It doesn't matter if you use a fill or not, but if you click and drag 2 circles on top of one another, remember what we did, if we press the V key on the keyboard to activate the selection tool, is we selected both of these circles, and we came over and we clicked minus front, and that would create a crescent-like shape. Well, if we undo that, Command-Z or Control-Z, if we go ahead and click minus back, the opposite will happen. I'll go ahead and do that. You'll notice that the crescent shape now is applied to this topmost shape. So those are the Pathfinders, and these Pathfinders can be helpful, again, when you're trying to create more sophisticated shapes based upon multiple shapes, and traditionally those multiple shapes will be basic shapes or more basic shapes to ultimately help you produce more complicated shapes.